From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Puck Podcast. It is Sunday, June the 15th, 2025. Happy Father's Day. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. First period, which some of you are watching on YouTube, is going to recap the final couple of games of the Stanley Cup Finals as they've been played to this point. Also, we will be discussing some news that happened over the past week in the National Hockey League. Second period will be our interview or special feature segment. This week, Doug is going to do a special feature about the upcoming free agents that could be available on July the 1st. And in the third period, it's our fan feedback segment where we read listener emails. We also have our off-ice report talking about what's going on in our lives. We had a pretty cool shout out from another podcast we'll mention and more. If you want to find all three periods of the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find it. Just search Puck Podcast. If you like what you're seeing on YouTube and you want to see or hear more of the podcast, that's where you need to go. But also subscribe, like, and enjoy the YouTube channel as well.
And Eddie is the voice you just heard. That King Eddie Garcia is a man that's been in the sports media business for basically his entire adult life. He's been. When was your first broadcast, professional broadcast, Eddie? How old were you?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about getting paid, I was actually paid to run the college, the campus radio station. So
yeah, but you did some. Didn't you do some local TV games before that?
Yeah, that was all free. It was all
okay. But when did that start? Let's start that.
Oh golly, I guess that would be in the 90s at some point.
Well, that's over 30 years ago. So he's been a member of the professional media for over 30 years. And I have as well, because we're old. And we're not that old, but we started young. And we've been sticking to it. And we've been doing this here podcast for over 19 years now. In fact, our 19th anniversary is a week from today. A month from now. July 22nd was our launch back in 2006, but we've been doing this show for 19 years. This is our 19th season covering the NHL as members of the professional media. And we were at the 2014 draft where a lot of the people playing in this year's Stanley Cup final were drafted. And I remember being there for that and seeing those guys and seeing the pictures of them now. And I'm like, I remember talking to him when he was that old. And now here he is as an experienced veteran in the Stanley Cup final. The point is, we're experienced podcasters. We're experienced members of the NHL media. And we've been doing this show a long time. And what we do on this show is we cover all 32 teams equally. We are not favoring any one team. If it's a big story in a city, it is a big story to us. Doesn't matter what city it is from. So unlike a lot of podcasts and national media, we will actually cover all 32 teams and discuss them equally and not just in passing in the last block before we go to break. So, but every week we do start with the biggest story of the week. And of course, right now, that is the Stanley Cup final. Two teams are actually still playing. For those of us that are fans of teams that didn't make the playoffs, it's been a long time since you saw a game involving your team. For those of us that are fans of teams that got eliminated in the first round, it's been a long time since you saw a game, but at least you got the playoffs. But these two teams are still playing and still have games scheduled ahead of us. So let's get caught up with the week that was in the NHL. And for that, I turn it over to my friend and co-host, King Eddie Garcia.
Thank you, mighty Doug Stolhand.
Mighty Joe Young.
So we, of course, are going to get into the Panthers and the Oilers. When we last left you, there were two amazing opening games of the Stanley Cup Finals. In Edmonton, Game 1 decided in overtime, 4-3. Oilers win it on a Leon Draisaitl game winner in sudden death. Game 2 went double overtime. Panthers win it 5-4. Brad Marchand with the OT game winner in that one. So what would Game 3 have in store for us as we shifted from north of the border down to the southeast of the United States? Unfortunately, Game 3 was not as good as the first two games and not even close. Florida jumping out to a 1-0 lead just 56 seconds into the game. Brad Marchand's 8th goal of the playoffs, found a rebound on a shot and was able to easily put it past Stuart Skinner, who was out of position. Carter Verhaeghe then closed out the scoring in the first period with a power play goal, wrist shot from the left faceoff dot perfectly into the top left corner of the net, and the Panthers were up 2-0.
I mean, obviously a great start for Florida. When you get a goal less than a minute in, what more could you ask for? And for Edmonton, I mean, they were in the series, obviously. It's tied, and it's obviously not over at that point, but an absolutely awful start. And Stuart Skinner has been good, certainly since taking over for Calvin Pickard back in the second round. But Edmonton actually got plenty of shots. They outshot Florida in the period 12-10. But obviously, when it's 2 goals are in, and the worst case, I think, for a road team in the playoffs is giving up that early goal, because the crowd coming off the anthem, coming off the introductions is amped up. And when they get a goal immediately, it just kicks them back into overdrive and keeps them in the game. And now they've got a 2-0 lead after the first period. So a very tough environment, but Florida only 40 minutes in, plenty of time left. And if you're Edmonton, you go in thinking, get the next goal. Let's go from there. And let's see how the second period would start, Eddie.
Well, they would get the next goal. Corey Perry's 9th of the postseason on the power play off a pass shot from Evan Bouchard. He gets it in front of the net and wrists it in to make it 2-1. So you're like, okay, here we got a game. But Florida would respond immediately. Sam Reinhart scores to make it 3-1. Very quick wrist shot through defenseman Jake Wallman and into the net. Sam Bennett then would add his playoff leading 14th goal of the postseason on a clean breakaway. And the Panthers had a 4-1 lead after 2. And things also started to devolve in the latter parts of the second period as the Oilers apparently decided the game was over and they started kind of going after some of the Panthers. I don't know if they were like trying to even up some scores or send messages for the next game, but a little surprising. It was 4-1 and certainly Florida looked like to be on their way to the win. I thought that Edmonton kind of got way out of what they normally do. And this is a team we've seen have many comebacks in these playoffs, but they seem to kind of lose it there at the end of the second period.
Well, they were starting to. The threads were starting to come out, but it was a very chippy first period as well. Evander Kane took a couple of bad penalties in that first period. There were 8 penalties total in the first period, and they were all animated. All the players were kind of, you could feel the edge that every player kind of had going in. They were upset at the way the game was playing, certainly for Edmonton. And I think it was obvious that Florida's play style of being, I think, passively dirty would be the way to describe Florida. They're not overt with their filth, but they get away with a little extra elbow in the corner, a little cross check, little butt end, little high stick here and there. And it adds up, because if you don't call it, it adds up. And when you see the score getting away from you, it starts to boil over. And the referees at that point have a choice to make of how to keep it under control. And that is to start calling everything, which they are loath to do in the playoffs because they tend to not want to call penalties, as we've talked about. But when things get out of control, you got to try and do something. And that is unfortunately not what happened in the third period.
Yeah, third period, Aaron Ekblad for the Panthers would score on the power play early. It's 5-1. That pretty much sealed the win, if it wasn't sealed already. And then the Oilers pulled Stuart Skinner. They put in Calvin Pickard. Evan Rodriguez would add the final goal also on the power play, as Florida would skate off with a convincing 6-1 victory. 21 penalties called on the Oilers, 14 on the Panthers. Florida was 3 for 11 on the power play. Sergei Bobrovsky allowed 1 goal on 33 shots in the win. Sam Reinhart, Evan Rodriguez, Carter Verhaeghe all had a goal and an assist. In the loss, Stuart Skinner allowed 5 goals on 23 shots. Calvin Pickard in relief, 1 goal allowed on 8 shots. And after 2 amazing games, this one honestly was pretty much garbage. I honestly, in the third period, if I didn't have to watch it because I'm doing several podcasts that you need to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals, I would have turned it off because I thought it was completely uninteresting pretty much the whole third period, and very surprising after those 2 amazing games to start the finals for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got an overtime win for each team in the first 2 games, and then we get a boat race in game 3 for the Panthers. And what was worse, I thought, was not that the Oilers got blown out, but that the way they responded to it. And They seemed like they just completely lost their cool, completely showed their frustration. And a few of the players, like I'm going to point out one guy in particular, because there was a lot of people that were having bad nights and were frustrated and let that frustration get the best of them. We had a 5-on-5 fight at one point where I was at work at the time, and somebody came out and knows I'm a hockey fan, so they came and found me and said, "My God, they're all fighting." I said, "That's nothing." I said, 30 years ago, the benches would have emptied and we would have had 20 people fighting out there. I mean, they don't let that happen anymore. But I said, "This is nothing." And so we were talking about that, but it's kind of like, and so my point is, non-hockey fans were enjoying the spectacle of it, even though it was not a close game. They were enjoying the chippiness and the fighting. I think a lot of hockey fans, us included, were embarrassed by it and just like, this is not what we're tuning in to see. But the one guy I thought went way over the line was Jake Wallman. He was absolutely a complete donkey and rectum. And he should have been
Agreed.
suspended. He should have been
Agreed.
suspended. There was one time, I think it was Matthew Tkachuk was being held by a teammate, and he sucker punches him right in front of the guy's held so he can't defend himself, and he sucker punches him in the head right in front of the referee. That you do that any other game, look at what the NHL would do. And they didn't even, I think they fined him twice for this.
Yes.
If you're going to fine him twice, then one of them has to be a suspension. You can't just say the first one's a fine and the second one's a fine. No, it has to escalate. And he was out of control in this game. And you need to be taught a lesson that is not acceptable. You can't just write two $5,000 checks, which to these guys is like giving them $20. Honestly, they're multimillionaires. So if I could boil over my frustration and punch somebody in the face that's been pissing me off, that can't even defend himself, and then I pay a $5 fine and get to come back to work the next day, that's not teaching me a lesson. So Jake Wallman should have been suspended after this game. He was the one of all the people that was absolutely out of control, in my opinion. A lot of guys were frustrated, but he was also specifically targeting Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, their best players. And again, if I'm on the Florida Panthers, I would have told him during one of the skirmishes that you better hope you never blow us out, because if you do, Greer's going to go over there and absolutely sucker punch Connor McDavid right in the face. And you better not, you can't say anything about it. You'll cry bloody murder, but it's exactly the same. You can't go after our best players in a blowout just because you're frustrated. It's what we talk about all the time about teams running up the score. I can't believe they still got the number one power play unit out there in the third period when they're up 4 goals. Then stop us. That's all you got to do. If you stop trying to win, we'll stop trying to score, but you're obviously still trying to score goals and tie the game. So we're going to keep the number one unit out there. Edmonton embarrassed themselves and embarrassed the league a little bit, but it was a spectacle. It was a blowout. Very impressive win for Florida. The best thing for Edmonton is that there were 2 full days off after this game. If they had come back 48 hours later and played another game, I don't think they rebound and have any chance to win, because you're not able to completely flush it from your system. But having 2 full days off, you have a full day off to decompress, another full day off, and then you get back at it. So you got 72 hours. I thought that made a big difference, but this was an embarrassing loss for Edmonton for sure.
Yeah, Wallman also had an incident that got some attention when he was squirting the water bottle over towards the Florida bench and got some water on the monitor there of Brian Boucher, the commentator in between the glass, who I think was a little perturbed by it as well. But yes. All right, so on to game number 4, again in Florida, and the Panthers would start strong in this one. A pair of Matthew Tkachuk power play goals for his first 2 goals of the series. The first one was on a 2-man advantage after penalties on Evander Kane and Darnell Nurse. Wrist shot from the right faceoff circle right after a faceoff win. Second goal came after a high sticking penalty on Matthias Ekholm. Tkachuk at the side of the net put in a rebound after Stuart Skinner had made the initial save. So again, 2-0. Florida off to the great lead. And then Anton Lundell would add a third goal. Great forecheck from Carter Verhaeghe. Gets the puck, passes it out in front to Lundell, who was going hard to the net. And the Panthers are off and running. They're up 3-0 after the first period.
9-1 the last 4 periods of hockey in favor of Edmonton, or in favor of Florida. And I got a message from a friend that said Edmonton is cooked at that point. The series is over. And have you noticed, on a side note a little bit, you mentioned the high sticking penalty against Matthias Ekholm. There's been quite a few high sticking penalties. Of course, that's a common penalty. But if you noticed, none of them have drawn the extra 2 minutes for bleeding, because all of these guys have massive beards that it would need a knife to cut through these things. A stick is not going to draw blood and go through that beard. So, plus they all have the visors and stuff like that. So not one has drawn blood to where they could get the extra 2 minutes. Whereas in the regular season, freshly, cleanly shaven cheeks, you get a little nick there, a little blood. All of a sudden, you get a 2 minute or an extra 2 minutes on the power play. But obviously, an awful first period for Edmonton, and they're outshot 17-7. They're completely overwhelmed at every phase of the game. They are losing their cool. They're losing the special teams battle. They're losing 5-on-5. They are looking terrible. And if you're the Oilers at that point, when you go into the locker room, after getting beat 6-1, giving up 3 straight goals, what can you do as a coach? What can you do as a player? Now, we talk a lot about leadership and the captains and the assistant captains and their leadership, but we all know veterans. You don't need a C on your chest to speak up in the locker room. And apparently, the oldest man in the series, Corey Perry, spoke up at the first intermission and said it was not motivational. It was anger, and basically, you can get the idea that he basically said, let's effing go. This is embarrassing. Enough of this. So he spoke up in the first intermission, and we'd see how that would affect them in the second period. And what do you do as a coaching? You got an opportunity to maybe make a lineup change, whether that's juggle some lines or make a change in net. And Chris Knobloch did exactly that. So you got a new goalie coming out and a fresh motivational speech from one of the leaders and veterans of the team. How would that impact the Edmonton Oilers in the second period?
Well, it was a complete reversal from the first period. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins scored on the power play to make it 3-1. Wrist shot to the top part of the net over the shoulder of Sergei Bobrovsky. Nice pass from Leon Draisaitl setting him up. Darnell Nurse then made it 3-2. A bad angle shot, but again, over the shoulder of Sergei Bobrovsky, where it's pretty clear the Oilers are looking to shoot high on Bob. And then Vasily Podkolzin with the equalizer on a rebound backhander. And somewhat shockingly, we are tied 3-3 after 2.
Not somewhat shockingly, completely shockingly. I mean, as I said,
this is an Oilers team that has
but it's
lot of comebacks.
It's 9-1 through the last 4 periods. And you're on the road and you looked embarrassed, or you embarrassed yourself at the end of game 3 and you looked non-competitive in the first period of game 4. To completely flip it and go into the second intermission tied was an amazing comeback for Edmonton. And credit to their resolve as players. They came out, they got outshot 17-7 in the first period. They outshot Florida 17-10 in the second period. Complete reversal, as you said. And now we're going in 20 minutes, fresh game, tied score. Basically, win 20 minutes, you're either up 2-0 or 3 games to 1 in the series, or it's 2-2 going back to Edmonton. So everything to play for both teams going into that third. And as we didn't mention it, but Calvin Pickard was in net and for that second period and came and did a very good job. Looked great. And remember, he's undefeated in these playoffs. He was 6-0. He got taken out due to injury. Stuart Skinner took over, was fine, so he never got another opportunity. But he is undefeated so far in these playoffs.
In the third period, the aforementioned Jake Wallman would score on a blast of a slap shot from the right faceoff dot. That gave the Oilers a 4-3 lead with their 4th straight goal of the game. However, with just 20 seconds left and the goalie pulled, Sam Reinhart would tie it up with kind of a broken play give and go with Matthew Tkachuk. Reinhart passed it to Tkachuk. He ended up fumbling it, and it went back to Reinhart, who would score. And we would be tied at 4-4. And for the third time in 4 games, we would go beyond regulation.
This is the best game so far for my money because it shows the resolve of both teams. Edmonton down 3-0 in the first period, being able to come back and not only tie the game before the end of the second, but take a lead, even though the guy that scored the game go-ahead goal should not have even been in the game, in my opinion, should have been suspended for this one. But they take a lead 4-3, and then Florida to give up 4 straight and be outplayed for the last 59 minutes of the game to come back and tie that game with the goalie pulled. Great resolve from both teams. We go into overtime, as you said, for the third time. Nothing new for these two teams. And the fans are on their feet in Florida and excited. And you would certainly think that momentum, the way it swung back and forth in this game, would favor Florida. But again, with the full intermission in playoff overtimes, not just the quick TV timeout, dry scrape the ice and get out of there, it's a much different overtime period because you're basically completely, it's like starting a new period in every way. So you get a chance to collect yourself. Momentum's going to be less of a factor of who just scored, and it's a fresh start.
On to overtime, and if you were going to bet on one player to score in the overtime period, it would probably be Leon Draisaitl because he does that a lot, and he did it once again. A one-handed push shot goes off of Panthers defenseman Nico Mikkola through the 5-hole on Sergei Bobrovsky. Was Draisaitl shooting it, or was he just trying to get it on net, or maybe he was trying to get it over to Corey Perry, who was crashing the net? Doesn't matter. It goes in. Put the puck on net, and good things happen. Down 3-0, the Oilers come back to win 5-4 in overtime, and the series is even at 2-2 for Draisaitl, his 11th goal this postseason, but his 4th overtime game winner. That's a new NHL record. Edmonton is the 7th team in NHL history to come back from down 3 goals to win a Stanley Cup Finals game, the first to do it since 2006 when the Carolina Hurricanes did it. And teams that had a 3-0 lead after the first period in the Stanley Cup Final had been 26-0 until the Florida Panthers lost this game in Game 4. For the goaltending in the win, you had Stuart Skinner allowing 3 goals on 17 shots. In relief, Calvin Pickard, 1 goal allowed on 23 shots, and he proves to 7-0 in this postseason with the win. For Sergei Bobrovsky, he allowed 5 goals on 35 shots in the loss.
Amazing comeback for Edmonton, obviously, and much needed. Obviously, this was not a must-win game, but highly suggested. They come back. By winning this game, not only do they even the series, but they regain home ice advantage. It's now a best of 3 with 2 possible games in Edmonton of the 3. And by winning the second of the 2 games in Florida, they take the momentum back to Edmonton with them and the belief that they're never out of this. They came back from down 3-0 last year against this team to force a Game 7. Now they come down from 3 goals down to win this game. And I think Draisaitl was trying to pass it to Perry, but it doesn't matter. It went in, as you said, throwing the puck towards the net. Bad things can't happen at that point for you. Only good things. The worst thing that could happen is he makes the save. He didn't. Game over and tied series. Fantastic game. I hope everybody that was watching the boat race in Game 3 came back to watch this one because they were highly entertained, and this was a fantastic battle. And it just set up what was great, what for those of us that don't really have a rooting interest, great drama for the remaining games, where no matter what happens in Game 5, we're not going to read too much into it because obviously blowout win followed by overtime win, or blowout loss followed by overtime win. One game doesn't lead into the other, and one period doesn't lead into the other, and 3-goal leads are not safe in this series, especially this year with Edmonton. They've done this multiple times against multiple teams, come back. They don't start the great, but they are like an old car. Once they get going, they are running and firing on all cylinders and look great by the end of the game. So impressive win for Edmonton, great resolve. And when you got 2 goalies that are capable of playing for you, obviously they're going to go back to Calvin Pickard for game 5 back home, as they should. He's 7-0. He just played great. It puts him in a good position for Game 5.
And I don't know what his bench press is, but I would contend that Leon Draisaitl is the strongest player in the NHL in terms of how he uses his strength and his size to shield off defenders. And I've seen him score one-handed goals before this season. It's not, again, even if he wasn't trying to do it, the fact that he can do things like that with a defender laying on his back, and he can still be strong enough to shield the man off and get the puck on net with some kind of velocity. The guy is just an absolute horse. And I mean that flatteringly. And I think if you're the Oilers also, you're like, we were down 3-0 on the road. We come back and win. And Connor McDavid didn't really do anything. I mean, you hold your breath every time he has the puck on his ice and he's got a little bit of speed, but he doesn't have a goal at this point in the series, and he had one assist in that Game 4 win. So even our best player wasn't really a factor in this one, and we were still able to come back and get a huge victory and even up this thing.
100%. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, we have been told, without being told exactly what the injury is dealing with an injury and playing through it. And he had a goal. You get a goal from Darnell Nurse, and you get a goal from Podkolzin, all depth guys. And Jake Waldman is not an expected goal scorer either. Second goal of the playoffs for Podkolzin, second goal for Waldman, third goal for Nurse. So your depth scoring comes through. It certainly helps, but I think obviously McDavid, the what plays against him is that literally the Selke winner is going up against him, and they have last change.
And the Selke runner-up.
Yeah, so if you got those two guys out there, they're obviously as good as anybody in the league at defending from forward positions, and you have good defensemen, and you have a good goalie. So he's got a lot to fight through to work against him, but he's still dangerous and still creating opportunities. And so when the other players are out there, they have an opportunity that is not against a Selke candidate and a Selke finalist and a Selke winner. So they took advantage, but you're absolutely right. The depth, they won a game where Connor McDavid had one assist, where they had to go to their backup goalie, not because of injury, but because of performance. And they were on the road and down 3-0. That is absolute theft of a win in the Stanley Cup final. And it sets up a dramatic Game 5.
So back to Edmonton for game number 5. And stop me if you've heard this before. The Florida Panthers would score the first 2 goals of the game. Brad Marchand off a faceoff at center ice. It was almost like he knew where it was going, like it was a set play of some kind. But the puck goes back towards the Oilers' net. He immediately gets right on it, splits the 2 defenders as they're not even barely out of their stance, and skates in and scores to make it 1-0. Florida then adds it to the lead 2-0 on a late goal from Sam Bennett, his 15th of the postseason and his NHL record 14th road goal this postseason. 6 consecutive road playoff game. He has scored a goal, and the Panthers have a 2-0 lead after 1. Just 3 shots on goal in the period from Edmonton. Florida has now outscored the Oilers 11-4 in the first periods of the finals so far.
And yet I did not think it was an outrageously bad period for Edmonton. I thought they had good chances. They just were not getting shots through. Florida played a defensive clinic. They were very controlled, very structured. They obviously did not want to get in a track meet with them. And I don't think it was a set play. I think that's a thing Brad Marchand does is I'm going to fly forward off the faceoff. If they win it, I can either pressure the person that has it or I can pick up loose puck. This time he happened to pick it up. He splits the defense, as you said, has a step on Ekholm, who was caught unaware, like, oh, what do I do here? And then the next thing they know, he's got basically a partial breakaway and he scores. The guy has amazing hands. So incredible play from him, the little rat bastard. You got to love watching him, though. He's entertaining. He's so good at what he does. And then late in the period, okay, it's 1-0, but it's still an even game. Obviously, plenty of time. Sam Bennett gets a loose puck out in the high slot and snaps it through 2-0. The one thing, though, is Edmonton just had this. So obviously there's no panic. Obviously there's no, oh my God, how are we going to come back from this? They've been in this exact situation. The game before it was 3-0. So I don't think there was any panic. There was no frustration. The penalties were far less. This was a much more controlled game from both teams. And this one was 48 hours after Game 4. So there was less time off, and you could tell that, I think, in the legs. There was less life in the legs of all players involved. And Brad Marchand was the only one that seemed to have a jump. He had some spring in his little legs, and he was flying. And that's, if you got one player, that can give life to your whole roster. And then but the defensive structure of the Panthers was very impressive. As you mentioned, only 3 shots against, only 8, which means that if I was in net, the score would have been 3-2 Oilers at the end of the first period. But only 8 shots for Florida. They weren't exactly flying around the ice, but they took advantage of the opportunities when they had them.
Second period, the Oilers had 2 big power play opportunities, but failed to convert on either of them. as a result, with the 2 power plays, it did help them to get some shots on goal in that second period. They outshot Florida 8-5, but still 2-0, as both teams did not get a puck into the back of the net, which has been very rare in this series.
No, that was the first period in this series that no goal was scored.
Well,
other
the first
than the
regulation,
first overtime.
the first regulation period, we had no goals. The first overtime period of the 2 overtime game in game 2 was the other one. Yes.
Yes. I do have a question for you, because I was not happy with this. The second power play for Edmonton in the second period was a delay of game penalty against Sam Reinhart. He was in his own zone. He did a backhand pass to chip it high up in the air. It goes completely across the rink into the Florida Panthers offensive zone and over the glass into the crowd. They did not call delay a game immediately. They all go and huddle around. There's no way, in my opinion, that they decided amongst themselves this was the penalty. They were sitting there talking, 4 of them. Hey, what did you see? I don't know. The crowd then sees the replay on the big screen and all starts cheering wildly. And then they decided it's a delay of game penalty. Now, either Toronto got in their ear and said it's a delay a game, or they were waiting for the crowd reaction. But I don't see how, if they didn't see it live, they all decided as a group 30 seconds later, yeah, that was a penalty. If you don't see it live, how do you go back retroactively? So I didn't like that, because it didn't seem like they saw it. They just called it based on their hunch, which it was the right call. I'm not saying they got it wrong, but they clearly didn't see it live, because not one arm went up, and neither did either linesman go over to the ref and say, yeah, he was inside the zone when he passed that and it was not deflected.
Well, it's not the first time we've seen a penalty called where an arm didn't go up, because the Sam Bennett goalie interference call, I think it was in game 2, was the exact same thing. Stuart Skinner's on the ice, they all huddle up, and then they decide that it was a goalie interference call. To me, if you're going to do that anyway, if you're going to take the time to huddle up, go ahead and just ask Toronto then. If you're going to waste the time of,
but I don't think they can.
That. Well, they have that replay assist in the NFL where they do that now.
Yes, but that's not in the NHL. The NHL, Toronto can't call penalties.
I mean, but if you're going to do it, might as well do it.
That's my thing, is that I think Toronto did call a penalty, in the sense that they waited until they either got confirmation from the crowd or from Toronto through earpieces.
Yeah, I don't think it was the crowd. I would be very surprised if they were going to take into account what the home team saw, because they're going to see what they want to see, regardless. So I would be surprised if it was that, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said somehow, whisper in their ear, hey.
Yeah, or a little hand signal from the guys in the scorer's table down there on, penalty, kind of whatever it may be, just an indication. But it obviously they didn't see it then, and I didn't like the fact that if you're not seeing it at live, I don't see how 30 seconds later you're certain enough that you call a penalty. It didn't end up mattering. Great penalty kill from Florida on both cases, but I didn't like the way that one got called.
All right, on to the third period, where Brad Marchand would make it 3-0 on maybe the goal of the postseason. An amazing move through Jake Wallman, then finishes with a little backhander through Calvin Pickard 5-hole, kind of reminiscent of his overtime game winner in the double overtime game. It was a game 3, I think, game 2. Anyway, that made it 3-0, and Marchand getting his 10th of the postseason, his 6th goal of the finals, and his 13th career Stanley Cup final goal. Just an absolute sick move from the veteran forward.
And again, off a faceoff, this time in the defensive zone, he again flies up towards the point. There's a loose puck. The Oilers won this one clearly. We're passing it from one defenseman to the other. And I think it was Eetu Luostarinen that got his stick in it and chips it up the ice to where Marchand, with his momentum, was already going. He collects it. He's off to the races. As you said, Wallman had good position, and then he just stick handles around him, lifts the stick up and over Wallman, and then he was inside position and finishes it off. That one felt like, I know it was only 3-0. I know Edmonton had a lot of comebacks, but that felt like the game-winning goal. because it just felt like if Edmonton was going to get a comeback, it had to stay 2-0. They get the next one, they can be potentially back in it. But that third one made it a 3-goal lead with less than 15 minutes to play. It felt like it was over, and yet Edmonton would have an answer.
Yeah, and it would be Connor McDavid getting his first goal of the finals. Nice pass from Evan Bouchard. He's in alone and made it look very easy.
Oh my God, he looked easy.
Yeah, 3-1 at that point. It almost looked like he was embarrassed to put it in.
Yeah.
It was so wide open because he just kind of barely flipped it in. But anyway.
He skates right in from the left wing, and everybody respected the pass. He just made a little move like he was going to go across, and then it was you could tell it was in slow motion to him that the game, he was playing everybody at a higher speed than everybody else. And it was just, his skill was on display on that one. If you want to see why he's the best in the world, that one was just, he made that look so ridiculously easy. It was a great pass from Bouchard to find him and get him set up for that. But my goodness, he made that look easy. Tap in.
Panthers, though, did come right back. Sam Reinhart scores a goal to make it 4-1. Edmonton would pull goalie Calvin Pickard with 5 minutes left, down 3 goals to get the extra attacker. And Corey Perry would score with that extra attacker, his 10th of the postseason, to make it 4-2. But Eetu Luostarinen would ice the game with an empty net goal, and the Panthers skate off with a huge 5-2 win to take a 3-2 lead in the series, as they are now 1 win away from repeating as Stanley Cup champions. That was the Panthers' NHL record tying 10th win on the road this postseason. Sergei Bobrovsky allowing 2 goals on 21 shots. The Panthers' third line of Marchand, Lundell, and Luostarinen had 3 goals, 5 points in all. Marchand scored 5 goals in the 2011 Stanley Cup final with the Bruins. He now has 5 goals in the Stanley Cup finals in 2025 with the Florida Panthers. Mario Lemieux,
right?
Mario Lemieux was the last player to have 5 goals in the playoffs, in the finals, in the expansion era. You're right, 6 goals.
He's got 6
goals. 6 goals. And the last player to have 6 goals in a Stanley Cup final, Esa Tikkanen with the Oilers back in 1988. For Calvin Pickard, he suffers his first loss of the postseason, 4 goals allowed on 18 shots, just a .778 save percentage. He was 7-0 coming in. Matthias Ekholm, the Oilers' best defensive defenseman, was a -3. Oilers power play 0 for 3. That put him at 4 for 23 in the finals. And in NHL playoff history, when a best-of-7 series has been tied 2-2, the winner of Game 5 has won the series 78.8% of the time. The last 4 winners of a Game 5 when it was tied 2-2 have gone on to win the Stanley Cup. Last time it didn't happen was when Brad Marchand won it with the Boston Bruins over the Vancouver Canucks in 2011.
Well, we know about the Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, they have the ability to come back in a game and in a series. We've seen both from them in these playoffs repeatedly. So nobody is counting them out at this point. I don't think anybody is going to be surprised if this goes 7 games. We're going to see Edmonton's best effort. They get a full 48 hours off. And I loved from the coverage of TNT that they went at the end of the game to Brian Boucher, who in Edmonton is on the Oilers bench. There's no gap between the benches. And he's standing next to Stuart Skinner. And they asked him, do you go back? They didn't ask him a name. They just said yes or no. And he gave the name. He started talking openly about, yes, I would go to Stuart Skinner in Game 6. You got to go back to your number 1 guy. He's sitting right next to you. I was waiting for Stuart Skinner to nod in agreement, give him a fist bump or something. But I thought that was fantastic job by their production crew to do that in the moment, not wait for the post-game show, not do anything of that nature. But of course you go back to Stuart Skinner. You tried Calvin Pickard, but it's going to be a tough task, obviously, for Edmonton. They have to somehow find a way, I think, to get out of the first period tied or in the lead. They have not been able to do that much this series, but I know they are good at comebacks, but you don't want to be in a position where the team on home ice to win the Stanley Cup has a lead and plays as well defensively as they do. Because
has the better goalie in the series.
And has the better goalie and has the Selke winner and has the Selke runner-up. That puts yourself in a very tough position. So for game 6, and look, Edmonton is not like, oh, gee, let me get a pen and paper and write this down. But they have to emphasize the start and not just trying to score, but let's concentrate on defense first in the first period. Don't give up that first goal, and don't give it up less than a minute in, like you did in game 4. Yes, we came back and won that game, but it puts us in a very bad position when the Stanley Cup is in the building and this team closed us out last year, has an opportunity to close us out again. You have to make this the longer it is tied, the better it is for Edmonton, in my opinion, because I don't think Florida wants to go back to Edmonton for a game 7, as successful as they've been on the road. You mentioned it's a NHL record 10th road win for this postseason. No team's been able to win 11. So they would have to do something no team in NHL history has ever done if they were to win this in 7 games. And I don't think they care about that, but they want to. Their players are playing through injuries as well. They sniff it, and the fact that they could win it on home ice and start celebrating as early as Tuesday, I think that is the emphasis that Edmonton has to have, is keep this tied as long as possible, and then let our either depth guys, or we get a power play, or our star players, somebody make a play to get us out of here with a win and force a game 7, then we take our chances. But if Florida, I should say, can get off to a good start again and has a lead at the end of the first period again, I think the comeback, you can't go back to Calvin Pickard and expect the same results. You can't expect another speech from Corey Perry to fire you up the troops. You're running out of options for comebacks here. And yes, you're good at it, but you don't want to put yourself in that position in a must-win game on the road with the Stanley Cup in the building.
Yeah, I totally agree about going back to Stuart Skinner. I certainly, look, the Panthers haven't been nearly as good at home for whatever reason as they had been on the road, but they did close that out on home ice last year with another chance to win it. They're definitely looking to do it and take care of business because they're smart. They're like, why would we want to give them an extra chance to win the Stanley Cup? This is our chance to do it. Let's do it. That said, if somehow the Oilers do get a victory in game 6 and force a game 7, I think the Panthers would be like, okay, we'll go do what we've done on the road all season and win another road game. So obviously, look, I do have a rooting interest. I won't lie. I'm rooting for the Panthers because I hate the Oilers. But of course, I also, as a hockey fan, would love to see a game 7 as well. So we'll see if it happens. I think it's been other than that game 3, it's been a pretty entertaining series. Seen a lot of amazing things, amazing goals, amazing comebacks, multiple overtimes. It's been a solid Stanley Cup final. I think certainly what would cap it up would be another game 7, but we'll see.
You don't want to see that. You don't.
If you can guarantee me that the Oilers are losing, I definitely want to see that.
But obviously you can't. So you want the Oilers to lose, and I get that. But I'm fine with it either way. Honestly, if there's a game 7, it'll be great drama. But if the Panthers earn it and win the game in game 6, it's still been a great series. We've had 3 overtime games through 5 games. This has been fantastic hockey and fantastic drama back and forth. It's been very exciting. So one thing we know about the NHL and baseball and even the NBA, there are no fluke champions. You don't just, it's not one and done. You have to earn every round that you advance. So by the time we get to this point, if either team wins, you can't really be upset because they've earned it. So if Florida closes it out in game 6, it'll be disappointing that there's no game 7, but they've been the better team through 3 of the first 5 games, and they've earned this opportunity to have a chance to close it out. But Edmonton, I fully expect them to win in game 6. I really do. I really think we're going to see the absolute best of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and their best is better than anybody else in the world. And if they get any power play opportunities, and I expect they'll get at least a couple, I expect those guys to take advantage and find a way to create some offense, whether they score directly or they set somebody up to score. So I think we're going to see the best of those guys, and I expect a game 7 back in Edmonton on Friday night.
Any final thoughts on the finals before we get to the news of the week?
No, it's been a fantastic series, very entertaining. And I've loved seeing the old guys, Brad Marchand and Corey Perry, continue to play well and lead their teams in goals in this series. It's been impressive to watch. A couple of guys that are been around for a long time and both have won a Stanley Cup in their past still continue to play at a high level.
All right, we did have some of the major awards, or I guess the major awards, handed out this past week. That included a double win for Winnipeg Jets goalie Connor Hellebuyck. He takes the Hart Trophy as league MVP and wins the Vezina as the league's top goalie. He edged out Leon Draisaitl for the MVP and pretty handily ran away with the Vezina Trophy, which was not a surprise. The fifth goaltender in NHL history to do the double dip, winning the Hart and the Vezina, which I got to assume there's never been a goalie that's won a Hart and not won a Vezina. But I didn't do the research on that. But the other goalies who have won the Hart and the Vezina in the same season: Jacques Plante back in the early 60s, Dominik Hasek in the late 90s, Jose Theodore in the early 2000s, and the last one to do it was Carey Price in the 2014-2015 season.
I'm always interested in the votes. I wasn't, obviously no surprise that Connor Hellebuyck won the Vezina. We knew that was going to be the case. But when you get the voting breakdown, there was actually somebody that did not vote for him first place. One person in the media gave the vote to Andrei Vasilevsky as the best goalie in the league. And I'd love to know who that was and their rationale, because Connor Hellebuyck had if you're just looking at the regular season, a historically good regular season. And then you look at the other third place votes, the people that got those third place votes. People voted Ilya Sorokin third place for the Islanders. Come on now. This has to, and two of them voted that. Sam Montembeault of Montreal got a third place vote. Come on now. As the Vezina, you're telling me he was the third best goalie in the entire league, in your opinion? Come on. Anthony Stolar's got a second place vote. Come on now. It's baffling. Connor Hellebuyck is first. We all know that, except for one person didn't know that. Andrei Vasilevsky, great. Darcy Kemper, absolutely. Logan Thompson, legitimate vote. Anything other than that, explain yourself. Get on national TV, get on national radio, explain yourself, because you are an idiot. You're an idiot. You should not be a member of the professional media. This is not a hard vote. And you're going Sam Montembeault? This is just terrible. So then we get to the votes for the Hart Trophy, which is much more wide open. I'll give you anything on this one. There's different interpretations of what most valuable is. Is it the person that the team wouldn't have done as well without them on there? Is it the best player in the league this year, et cetera, et cetera? But I was very surprised that Connor Hellebuyck won the Hart Trophy. Good for him. It's something that he's going to go into the Hall of Fame with on his resume as a former Hart Trophy winner, multiple Vezina winner. I don't think he's going to win a Stanley Cup because he can't win in the playoffs on the road. So he's going to have a lot of regular season success. He's going to be the Roberto Luongo, the Henrik Lundqvist, the Jose Theodore. Great regular season success, not a lot of playoff success, although a couple of those guys had some good playoff success. But I was very surprised to see him win this, and he won it easily. That's what got me. I'm like, this must have been a razor-thin margin. No, he won it by over 130 votes, or points total. Basically, there's a 10-point allocation if you get a first-place vote, 7 points for second, 5 for third, 3 for 1 for fifth. So they go 5 deep on the ballot. He had the most first-place votes of anybody. He had 81. And that surprised me a great deal. And the guy that won the Ted Lindsay, who all the players said that's the best player in the league, Nikita Kucherov, was third. I was very surprised by that. And he was fourth in first place votes. Nathan McKinnon got more first place votes than him. Leon Draisaitl got more, and of course Connor Hellebuyck. And then you go down the line again. Again, this was a first place vote. I'm going to list off the people that got first place votes for the most valuable player in the entire league, Eddie. Jack Eichel got 2 of them. Zach Werenski got 1. Alex Ovechkin got 1. Nick Suzuki of the Montreal Canadiens. I think we know who voted for them. Same dude that voted for Sam Montembeault third. Again, explain yourself. Come on out on national TV and explain yourself. And then we get to the second place votes. David Pastrnak got a second place vote this season. We're not talking career. We're talking 2024-25. David Pastrnak was the second best player in the league, according to you. The second most valuable player for a team that didn't make the playoffs. So you're not talking about valuable to his team because his team sucked. Anybody could have done what he did to help his team. They didn't make the playoffs. You're talking about the best player in the league was David Pastrnak was the second. Explain yourself. That's outrageous to me. And then you get into, I don't really care too much about fifth place votes, but there was a lot of people that I thought were interesting. Darcy Kemper got a fifth place vote. Jack Hughes, even though he didn't finish the season. Philip Gustafson. Sidney Crosby. I think that's just a default. That guy had that filled out before the season. Guy or gal. Robert Thomas. Brady Tkachuk. And Andrei Vasilevsky, who was second in the Vezina, only got one fifth place vote for the entire. So somebody thought he was the most valuable or best goalie, but not worth an MVP vote. So baffling votes. I was surprised Connor Hellebuck won it. I don't think he wouldn't have been first place on my ballot, but good for him. And that's something that he's going to, like I said, take into retirement with him as quite the feather in his cap. An absolutely horrible job by the NHL of keeping this a secret. Photos leaking out before they had made the announcement of him with both trophies. Then they have an awards show where they're trying to add like there's drama, like we don't already know who won. I don't know what the point of that was. It was very poorly done by the NHL in that sense.
Colorado Avalanche defenseman Cale Makar won the Norris Trophy by a decent margin over Zach Werenski. Second time in his career that he has won the Norris. He led the league in defensive scoring, goals, assists, points, 30 goals, 62 assists, 92 points this season for Cale Makar.
Well, now we get into it. I've brought up the voting, so you got to talk about that. It's a runaway win. 176 first place votes. You go 5 deep again, so same system that they used for the Hart Trophy. Zach Werenski got 13 first place votes. Quinn Hughes got 2. Nobody else got any. I'm not really going to take too much issue with any of those. I get it. It's a much more subjective thing because you could look at it as the best defensive defenseman, the best overall defenseman, the best offensive defenseman. There's different ways to go about it. But thought it was an interesting vote when you get down into the bottom of it. Adam Fox somehow still got a third place vote. I didn't think he had a good season. And the Rangers certainly didn't have a good year. Ryan McDonough still getting 4th and 5th place votes. I thought that was an interesting one. Brock Faber from Minnesota. I was surprised, 5th place vote. And Shea Theodore getting a 5th place vote as well. But I thought the guy that earned some more votes than he got was Lane Hudson. We know he had an incredible year. He had 1 third place vote, 5 4th place votes, and 22 5th place votes. I thought he should have been a little bit higher in the rankings overall. But an impressive year from him. And the good news for Dallas is that the guy, we know Miro Heiskanen lost a lot of time due to injury. And the guy that took over his minutes and his opportunity was Thomas Harley. He finished 7th overall in the Norris Trophy voting with a 2nd place vote, actually, and a 3rd place vote as well. So good for them to have that in their position. Now they have Miro Heiskanen and Thomas Harley for a full season coming back next year. Who knows who the head coach will be of Dallas?
Speaking of Lane Hudson, the Montreal Canadiens defenseman won the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year. Dustin Wolf was a distant second. Lane Hudson is the 7th Montreal Canadiens player to win the Calder, first since Ken Dryden in 1971-72. If you're curious, and I was, the Blackhawks and Maple Leafs have the most Calder Trophy winners, each with 10.
Absolutely no-brainer, much like Connor Hellebuck for the Vezina. This was a known thing before the votes were even revealed. So well done by him. An amazing season, a historically good season from a guy that nobody going into the season said, I bet Lane Hudson is your Calder winner or a Calder candidate this year. Absolutely nobody saw that coming.
Not even a 1st-round draft pick, 2nd-round draft pick.
Yeah, Matvei Michkov was considered a strong contender, and he ended up 4th. Macklin Celebrini, of course, a strong contender. He ended up 3rd. Cutter Gauthier out here in Anaheim, he was considered a strong candidate. He ended up fifth. Will Smith, not that one. He ended up sixth, and there was some decent votes there down at the bottom. You had Mackie Samoskevich getting 2 votes on fifth place. Drew Hellison for Anaheim getting a vote in fifth. Marco Casper in Detroit got 7 fifth place votes. So I had no real problem with this one. Lane Hudson got the overwhelming majority of first place votes and ran away with this, as he should.
And I will mention it because I am an LA Kings honk, but Anze Kopitar won the Lady Byng for the second straight year, and they surprised him on the golf course. His kids came out, gave it to him, and I did chuckle when his daughter said, "Congratulations on being voted the nicest player in the NHL," which is kind of true, I guess, in some sense. But anyway, Anze Kopitar wins the Lady Byng.
He's won that many times, right?
Third time he's won it, yeah.
Yep, there you go.
We did have a trade of some significance in the NHL this past week involving Doug's favorite team, as the Ducks and Rangers made a deal. Chris Kreider goes to Anaheim along with a 2025 fourth-round pick. New York gets prospect Casey Terrence and a 2025 third-round pick.
Well, I love it as a Ducks fan because it is a jumpstart to free agency. It's knowing exactly what you're getting. You don't have to hope you sign the player. You don't have to outbid people for him. You get him immediately, and he had to waive his no trade clause to come to Anaheim. He did. So that's a good sign because we know that in the past, players have not been willing to do that to come to Anaheim. I think it helps that he had 3 ex-teammates already on the Ducks that he could call and talk to. Frank Vetrano, Ryan Strome, and Jacob Trouba are all already on Anaheim that are former teammates of his with the Rangers. But the Ducks had the worst power play of the league last year. He is a power play specialist. He is a net front presence that is unmatched in the NHL as far as his productivity from in front of the net on the power play. So that's going to obviously help them. He's also a penalty kill threat. He had as many shorthanded goals last year as the entire Ducks team did. So he adds to their threat on both power play and penalty kill. He's not going to be a 5-on-5 boost, but that's not what they're getting him for. They're getting him for special teams, they're getting him for leadership, and they're getting him for playoff ability should they make it that far. I absolutely love it. He's got 2 years left on his deal at $6.5 million. Even after the trade, and the Ducks gave up nobody off their active roster, so they did not shed any salary in this trade. The Rangers are not paying any portion of Kreider's salary. They're taking on the entirety of his remaining contract. But even after the deal, the Ducks still have over $32 million in cap space this summer, which is third most in the entire NHL. So this will not prevent them from signing anybody, either internally or in free agency. The cap is going to go up again the next summer after that. So his $6.5 million in 2026-27 will not prevent them from signing anybody or retaining anybody. So it's absolutely, there's no reason not to get it. He averages 30 goals a season in his NHL career. He is, as I said, a power play specialist at this point, net front presence, and Chris Kreider and Trevor Zegras work out a lot and run a charity tournament every summer together in New York. So they are good friends. They are excited to play on the same team. He said all the right things about coming, and I have no doubt that, in my mind at least, if Greg Cronin was still the coach, he would not have waived his no trade clause. Joel Quenneville makes this an attractive place to play for a lot of players. And seeing a guy that's won multiple Stanley Cups as a head coach, is the second winningest coach of all time in the NHL, is a guy that a lot of players have enjoyed playing with over the years and have spoke glowingly about, and is a guy that in his entire career, 25 years behind the bench as an NHL head coach, has had one losing season. I think that's an appealing person to come and play for if you're a player. And obviously Kreider is here. I don't think either piece that the Ducks gave up will be something they miss. Casey Terrence is not a guy that I think is going to have an impactful NHL career. And the third round pick, good luck with that. Whoever they get, maybe they end up with the Lane Hudson type. Maybe they don't, but let them take that risk. This helps the Ducks immediately for the next 2 years. They gave up basically nothing to get him, in my opinion. And there's no reason not to do it. Absolutely love it. For New York, they love it as well because they did not have a lot of cap space. This gives them an extra $6.5 million to go spend. The problem a lot of Rangers fans have is they don't trust Chris Drury to spend that money wisely. but he has done a good job of shedding some veteran contracts in the last few years. Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba, now Chris Kreider. That's freed up a lot of money for him to go and either retain talent or attract new players to come to New York. And we will see how he spends that money this summer. But for the Ducks, I absolutely love it. It makes them better, makes them deeper, it improves their special teams. And I expect him to score at minimum 20 goals and potentially 30 or more next season. So if you can add that to your team, why wouldn't you? And I loved the trade for the Ducks.
One other note from me from this past week, TJ Oshie announcing his retirement after 16 seasons and 1,010 games for the Blues and Capitals, won the Stanley Cup with Washington, and was probably best known for his shootout prowess, particularly in the 2014 Sochi Olympics, where he scored 4 shootout goals on 6 attempts against Russia, where they had that rule where you could just put the same guy out there over and over again. And they did. And it did make some headlines because he was pretty successful at that. But TJ Oshie, who did he even play a game this year? I don't know that he did.
He did not.
Yeah. Announcing his retirement as expected.
Yeah. He, a guy that certainly is going to be well remembered, as you mentioned, for the international play. That was amazing. Just keep putting him back out there, and he kept scoring. The guy was unbelievable. But I'm glad he won a Stanley Cup with the Capitals, because I think every player, your career feels incomplete if you don't win that championship. And him having to retire early due to injury, it makes it a little easier knowing you got that Stanley Cup ring, you got that memory, you always got that brotherhood of teammates that you won that cup with, that you'll reunion with every 5-10 years to commemorate and celebrate and remember. And that's always going to be something, 40 years from now, when he's in his 70s, he'll still be getting together with those guys and talking about, remember that time, remember this time. This is the guy that won the game 3 for us, whatever it was. So it's going to be good for him, a good career. I hate seeing guys have to retire due to injury, but he knew it was his time to retire, and he was a free agent. He got his full check. So there's no left money on the table, but hate to see him go due to this.
Anything that I missed that you wanted to bring up from the past week in the NHL?
No.
Then that will do it for our first period of the YouTube show. If you enjoyed what you heard and saw, make sure you check out the remaining 2 periods of the podcast. Search Puck Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. If you are listening to the podcast right now, second and third periods are coming right up. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we'll talk to you next time with another edition of the Puck Podcast.